Good evening, and welcome to Midnight Horror Society. Here we take the strange and the chilling and tell them slowly, like whispers meant for the night. Before we begin, take a second to like the video and subscribe only if you feel at home here. In the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always comforting to see how many of us are awake together in the dark. So dim the lights. Let the sound of the night, rain, crickets, or just the quiet of your room settle around you. Get comfortable. And when you're ready, let's step into tonight's story. The car's cabin smelled like stale coffee and lemon-scented glass cleaner, the artificial brightness people sprayed on when they were too tired to actually wash the fatigue away. Miles had been on the road for 12 hours. The rideshare app kept nudging him with little dopamine pellets. Quest unlocked. One more ride for a bonus. Surge X 1.2 if you head north. Like a casino that had learned to speak in friendly notifications, his dash cam's red LED blinked in the corner of the windshield like a patient heartbeat. He would not have taken another call if the map hadn't pulsed red along the inlet road. Easy money. Close. He tapped accept before he let himself think about the time, about the way the dashboard clock slid toward 2:17 a.m. like a judge's gavel. Pickup. Bay 7, Willow Spit boat launch. Destination, Harbor Street, Greyhook. The account name was Marsh. The rating was immaculate, 4.98. No photo. Willow Spit was a strip of asphalt and creosote pilings on the inside of a long bar of sand, the kind of place where aluminum skiffs rattled on their trailers and old men in wool hats argued about engines with the stubbornness of a second religion. By day, the gulls screamed. At night, the spit went quiet except for the slap of eelgrass against the pilings and the distant, throaty diesel rumble of tugs shepherding barges through the narrows. He killed his high beams as he turned in. There was one other car in the lot, a two-door sedan the color of wet stone, windows fogged. A woman stood near the ramp where the gravel turned to slick mud and the water lapped and drew back, working its patient arithmetic on the whole shore. She wore a dark pea coat that fell to mid-thigh, the kind of coat that suggested she knew what a marine layer did to bone. A hood was up. Loose strands of hair stuck to her cheek in the damp. She had no bag. When he rolled to a stop, she didn't move immediately. She finished whatever thought had her attention, then stepped into the halo of his headlights and lifted a hand, as if greeting an acquaintance she hadn't yet decided to forgive. Miles unlocked the doors. She slid into the back. "Good morning," she said. The voice had the slightest rasp, as if she'd used it too much earlier, or not at all for a long time. Up close, the coat smelled faintly of iodine, steel, and rain. He pulled back onto the two-lane and let the tires find the shallow grooves tourists didn't see in summer. "Where on Harbor?" "Number 3, she said. "End of the street." "Dockside." He nodded. The meter tripped. The phone screen showed the soft blue thread of the route hugging water, diving briefly into firs and re-emerging along the old cannery buildings that had become cafes full of people who liked the idea of canneries. He didn't bother to turn on the radio. It was easier not to risk a song that would cause the old film reels in his head to begin clicking and throwing up images he wasn't interested in seeing anymore. The dash cam's LED kept time. It always did. They passed under the new bridge. The low tide exposed dark ribs of rock and the stubble of mussels on the pilings. In the rear view, the woman's face was not much more than the pale geometry of cheek and brow shadow. Her hands were folded in her lap with careful symmetry, thumbs touching. She had the stillness of someone who had rehearsed being patient until it was second nature. "You work late," she said. "Sometimes." You like the night? He considered. It's quiet. It is, she said, and forgiving. Less to look at, if you don't want to see anything. His left hand tightened slightly on the wheel. The habit he fought flared anyway, the two-finger tap against his thigh, just above the pocket where a knife used to ride. 3 years since he'd carried any kind of blade, and the nerve still hummed like a plucked wire. I'm Marina, she said. He snorted before he could help it. Like the boats. Like the sea, she said. Spelled like the water, not the place you tie to it. Okay. And your miles. Your profile says so. Who else would I be? Some people are very good at being many things, she said. Her tone wasn't admiring. The road curved inland where the spit pinched and the wind picked up, or the trees funneled it. Rain freckled the windshield. The fine mist you could pretend wasn't rain until your bones started to ache. She didn't talk for a mile. It would have been fine if she hadn't then spoken in the exact cadence of his memory. My father used to launch from Willow Spit, she said. Same ramp. Same gray. He said the eelgrass there always looked like hair in the water, all that green swaying. Miles found himself visualizing it with uncomfortable clarity, the way the grass had cupped around boots, the way it had stroked ankles, the whisper of it against aluminum. He had a little skiff, the woman said. 16-foot Klamath. Johnson outboard, 25 horsepower. White hull with a dent on the port side where he misjudged a piling and never got around to fixing it. You from here? He asked, knowing the question was inadequate, but unable to find another to replace it. He let the wiper speed up a notch. The rubber blade ticked. I was, she said. Then I wasn't. Now I am again. Uh-huh. He liked to fish the banks out past the bell buoy. Knew the tides in his bones. Knew the way fog sits when it intends to stay. He kept a ledger by the phone. Tide tables, bait, notes in his handwriting. You know the kind. Careful block letters, no loops. He wrote like he built. True and square. There was a scratch inside his chest. Something reaching a finger along the inside of his ribs as if it could read through them. He said nothing. He did not go out the night he died, the woman said. The ledger proves it. The tide was wrong. The fog was wrong. His notes say that. And still he ended up in the water. You're telling me, Miles said carefully, because bodies tell true stories if people bother to listen. Her voice didn't rise or fall. His lungs had a little water. Not much, not enough for a man pulled under by a sudden squall. The coroner called it consistent with immersion. Such a gentle phrase. His wrists told a different story. The bruising wasn't symmetrical. One side wider, the other with a point. Like rope, Miles said. A dock line. Like a zip tie. The woman's reflection in the glass looked briefly like someone he might recognize, and then it became only a face again. They don't always leave clean circles. They leave personality. Teeth marks. He took in a breath he didn't need, felt the tang of salt. Somewhere down by the marinas, a halyard clanged against a mast. Ting, 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 like a metronome for people who had wanted ocean and bought a slip. What was your father's name? He asked. Garrick Lowe. The name slotted into a drawer he had refused to open for 8 years. It came with a smell, the cold, iron smell of wet chain. It came with the soft scuff of deck shoes on fiberglass and the shout of a man who wasn't yet afraid and then was. It came with another name, too, Brody Pike, who'd like to be called captain, despite the fact that their runs never left sight of land and the only thing he piloted with authority was a pickup with the tailgate chained shut. Miles caught his hand as it began to move toward his thigh again. He set it on the wheel. He told his shoulders to drop. He told his voice to be boring. "Sounds like you miss him," he said. "I do," she said. "And I am very good at not confusing missing with forgiving." They were coming into Greyhook now, the oldest part, the cannery with its corrugated metal ribs, the former fish meal plant that had been reborn as 4 galleries and a Pilates studio where women in expensive leggings pretended to be boats, the harbor street that ran stone straight to the dock, where the pilings wore coats of black creosote and barnacle-like armor. "Harbor Street is closed after midnight," he said. "Construction." "I have a key," she said. "To the gate." "Drive on." Her phone, angled in her palm, showed a green bar walking across the screen like a slow fuse. She didn't hide it. She didn't explain it. He didn't ask how. He didn't have spare questions he could afford to have answered. The chain at the end of the street sagged like a shrug between 2 steel posts. She leaned forward, showed him a brass key on an old tag stamped with a number, 3. She had to reach past him to unlock the padlock. Her sleeve brushed his shoulder, and neither of them pretended it was accidental. Somewhere in the car, a soft chirp sounded. The little plastic note his vehicle made when the fob moved where it shouldn't. The chain fell. He drove through. "End of the pier," she said softly. "Then we'll talk. You, me, and the tide." He rolled to the last bollard. As he reached for park, Marina leaned past him again to the padlock. Metal rattled. Chain spilled like coins. When she drew her hand back, something small and black was in her fist. She opened her fingers so he could see it. His key fob. "I should have asked," she said, not sounding sorry. "You were concentrating on the gate." The creosote smell grew teeth. He felt it sit in his nose like old smoke. He cut the engine and looked at the empty ignition, the dead little circle where push button meant nothing without a fob. She stepped out first and let the door thunk shut. She didn't hurry him. By the time he joined her, rain had made the planks glitter. Harbor Street behind them was quiet and chained again. She had relocked it with the same brass key stamped 3. The world had that strange maritime silence made of small sounds. Water finding wood, rope creaking, a gull reconsidering a complaint. "Why here?" he asked, because ritual still wanted its cue. "Because this is where you loaded him," she said. "Not you alone." The word ledger seemed to hang in the damp. Chain is simple. Simple served you well. She crouched and laid her palm on the boards as if the dock were breathing. When she stood, she didn't step closer to him. She reached into her coat and took out a phone already on a countdown screen. 91 seconds. Green numbers walking toward 0. "I like clean books," she said. "When this timer ends, Detective Shore gets a packet. Our location, a 30-second clip of your voice from Bay 7 tonight, your current name, the old one you used when you worked for Brody Pike, and a scan of my father's ledger page. Ramp camera at Willow Spit. Harbor padlock tag stamped 3. ALPR hits on your plates. She'll pull all of it. If I'm fine, I cancel with a passphrase. If I don't, she calls the pier cameras live and sends a car. The state is patient. I am too." Miles tried not to look at the fob. He looked anyway. "You could have just called her." "I did," she said. 3 times in the spring, politely. I am done being polite with time. He touched his thigh, the tick, the absent knife. "What if I say no?" "You can," she said, "but you won't leave fast. The gate is chained, the fob is with me. Your app has you on a live trip to Harbor Street with a writer named Marsh who happens to match a statement on file. Your dash camera sees me. My camera sees you. If I walk to the pier office and say I'm afraid, they'll call it in. Refuse, and you meet shore wet and soon. Comply, and I finish the math. She let the timer walk down to 10 and then, without looking, spoke a phrase that sounded like nothing, ledger balanced. And the counter reset to 5 minutes. She slipped the phone back into her pocket next to something thin and pale that he only realized were zip ties when the tail of one flashed. Not brandished. Just there. "I told you," she said, almost gentle. "I'm a bookkeeper." His body did the arithmetic. Gate. Fob live packet. Sure. The quiet fact that nobody had to raise a voice. "What do you want me to feel?" he asked, heat pushing behind his eyes the way weather pushes behind headlands. "Say it plain. Not the numbers." "The minute before the minute," she said. "Count it for me." She turned and nodded toward the post with the fire hose wrap and the shackle he hadn't seen until now because his mind had been busy pretending it could negotiate. Close by, the chain lay oiled, curled like a tame thing waiting to remember it wasn't. He drew breath. The air was colder than it had been a minute ago. He couldn't tell if the temperature actually shifted or if it only felt that way now that his body had decided to count honestly. "How long did you look for me?" he asked. 8 years, she said. 5 men, then 4, then 3. One drank himself into a ditch, which was unsatisfying. Another bragged in a bar. He did not brag again. 2 had wives who loved them and did not deserve collateral damage. "I am not indiscriminate. I am a bookkeeper." He pictured her with ledger lines in her head, neat columns inked in a hand that never smudged. Figures carried correctly, debits that were not left to languish in someday. He pictured the way Pike had laughed that night when the fog had closed in enough to make the dock lights little islands in a private sea. The way he'd said, "This is the ocean's problem now," turning his back before the splash. Pike was 2,000 miles away under another name, or he was not. Men like that did not lose their names. They made the world call them something else until the world obliged. "I changed mine," Miles said. He didn't know why he said it. "I know," she said. He sat on the edge of the dock with his legs hanging over, without deciding to. On nights when it wasn't raining, he sometimes came here alone after a shift and watched the luminous comb jellies pulse around the pilings like small alien lanterns. He wondered if they were down there now, cold blue, waiting. The woman, Marina, straightened. She was a head shorter than he was. When she looked up, the light from the dock's single sodium fixture turned her eyes the bronze green of old pennies. "There's a post 5 yards back," she said. "It has a cleat at waist height. I've wrapped the base in old fire hose so it won't abrade the line. There's a shackle already on the chain. It's a good shackle. New. The pin threads cleanly. It will not seize. You will put it around your right ankle." He pictured the photograph a trooper had taken of Garrick Lowe's ankle. The bruising had looked like someone's fingers had failed to grab properly around bone. The coroner called it consistent with environment. The ocean takes liberties with the body it keeps. People nodded because the ocean sounded large enough to be guilty. "Why the right?" he asked ridiculously. "You always pivot left," she said. "I watched you get in and out of your car 3 times this week. Everyone has a hinge. What if I say no?" "You can," she said again, not unkindly. Her phone hummed once in her pocket, the timer asking to be believed. "But I already told you what no buys." He thought of the knife he didn't carry. He thought of the way fisherman's rope leaves brown on fingers when it is wet and you pull against it. He thought of running. He thought of how long he'd really been running. "What do you want me to feel?" he asked, angry suddenly, with a kind of old-fashioned, childish heat at the back of his eyes. Say it. Out loud. Not the math. The thing. Say it. She took a breath. The rain made a halo on the shoulder of her coat. I want you to lie where the water can find you, she said. And think about the minute before the minute. The very last moment when your body still believes it might negotiate. I want you to count out loud when the tide touches your toes. I want you to count when it covers your knees. I want you to say a number for the waterline on your chest, another for your mouth. I want you to stop when you can't say numbers and then keep counting in your head. That's the minute I want. That's the one he had. That's the one you didn't. Is this mercy? He tried for contempt and found there wasn't enough breath behind it. You doing it here instead of out where it's black? It is accuracy, she said. He stood. The dock flexed under his weight. He walked back toward the post because his legs knew the way to the place where he owed something. The chain lay coiled like a sleeping thing, its links oiled recently, not with the gummy smell of machines, but with something like olive oil. Civilized. A 3-pound anchor lay beside it. Not a fisherman's anchor, but a mushroom, meant to hold gently to mud. The shackle's pin showed clean threads. Everything about the arrangement spoke of preparation that had not needed to be rehearsed in the open, because it had been rehearsed in the mind to the point that muscle would merely obey. What about the cold, he asked, kneeling, grasping the chain, feeling the way it bit into the pad of his palm. I mean, hypothermia. I'll go under too soon. Not tonight, she said. It's early autumn. The water is 54. You'll shake. You won't lose yourself for a while. It was not a sentence she lifted to comfort. She drew her phone, spoke ledger balanced, and the timer obediently reset. 5 more minutes of quiet threat, of math that could be stopped only by her voice. He sat and took off his shoe. His sock clung, wet with rain. He didn't bother to peel it. He fed his foot through the open shackle. He paused. You'll take it off if I ask, he said. No, she said. He nodded. He turned the pin, and the threads accepted him. The bar slid home. He felt the weight of the chain pulled gently by nothing more than gravity and the idea of the water to come. He passed the chain around the post twice in a figure 8 and took her word for the fact that the wraps would keep the movement clean. He left a yard of slack. He didn't ask how she had calculated the difference between the height of the dock and the tide table he knew she'd printed and highlighted and folded in thirds. He suspected she had checked it against the NOAA station on the headland and then checked it again. He stood. The chain settled. He moved to the edge and sat again. He pulled his other knee up. He waited. Tell me the shape of him, she said. He didn't ask who she meant. Square, he said. Square hands. Square jaw. The kind of chest that makes a jacket look like it's hanging on a closet door. He was not afraid right away. Then he was very afraid. Did he beg? He asked us to stop, Miles said. He said, I have a daughter. He looked at her and tried to find her at 15, the shape of a girl's jaw under a woman's. He tried and failed. He said softly, I heard her name when he said it. She closed her eyes briefly. The pared-back expression on her face shifted in a way it hadn't since she got in the car. Then she looked out at the black water and said, You count when it touches your toes. The tide in the inlet didn't announce itself with drama. There was no sudden sluice. The bay simply rose the way a chest rises in certain kinds of sleep. The water worked the eelgrass, and the eelgrass stroked the pilings, and the dock creaked. Not like something failing, but like something taking breath. The first lick of water found the pad of his big toe and set it afire. He said, 1. The numbers kept the mind where it should be. That, too, was a ledger, he thought. He did not bother to say it aloud. The water reached his ankle. 2. His body shook. He didn't try to stop it. The chain vibrated against the post and set up a low hum that his bones heard. The water found his shin. 3. He breathed with care through his nose. The rain came a little heavier and then light again, and the sodium light hissed, and a gull set its head under its wing, decided nothing was occurring that required gulls. What did you do after? She asked. I drove, he said. South along the coast, then east. Then I stopped remembering the names of towns. Then I started using new names for me. I found jobs where you moved things from one place to another. Boxes, people, money. It was always a line that could be drawn. It made sense. If I could keep things moving, I would never be in any one part of the line long enough to get noticed. The water touched the tender inside of his knee. He said, 4. Did you laugh about him? She asked. The question was not hostile. It was accounting. I didn't, he said. But someone did. I do not say that to shift anything to him. I say it so you will know what you already know. Some men can laugh and live. Others shut up and drive. 5, he said. He asked us not to use chain. He said rope would be kinder. He said he would make it easy if we used rope. He could see the green polyline coiled like a cheap cartoon of rope on the dock. He could see the way chain lay like a sermon. He thought of how often he had chosen the sermon because it cut out the part where men might double back from the ocean with a story. 6. Take off your coat, he said suddenly. You'll be soaked. She did not move. I have another. 7. The water pressed cold coins into his thighs. His muscles felt like glass. His teeth ached as if they were tiny radios tuned to a station that only spoke temperature. Tell me about Brody Pike, she said. And it was not a gamble. It was a signature on a ledger line. He liked to take pictures of himself holding things that didn't belong to him, Miles said. Fish, money, other men's choices. He said the ocean was a place that accepted accounting in full. He said that even cities had trouble denying the ocean its receipts. He was shaking hard enough now that the chain at his ankle throbbed. He knew the harbor master. He knew the man who ran the ice. He knew how to make the scale read lighter when it was time to pay and heavier when it was time to sell. He knew how to make the police look where he pointed. 8. She stood now. The rain slicked her hair to her scalp. The sodium light made the drops on her lashes into a string of beads. He understood that she could stand forever. In her pocket, the timer hummed once. She palmed it, whispered the passphrase, reset. Ledger balanced. The water found his belt. 9. It rose and pressed the small of his back. It negotiated his ribs the way a careful hand reads Braille. He discovered that he was crying because his mouth tasted of salt, and it wasn't all the inlet anymore. You can still run, he said to her, surprised by the word run, and what it meant rolling out of him like a coin. You can still decide this ledger is complete, and you don't need to carry it another step. She tilted her head. You can still say his name again, she said. In a way, that sounds like you mean it. Garrick, he said. The syllables felt too small for the man. Garrick Lowe. 10. The water reached his sternum. He had to lift his chin now to keep his mouth clear. The chain was no longer anything other than a fact. The dock above him was the ceiling he had chosen. He had chosen it, he told himself, because sometimes men do the math correctly. You asked me what I want you to feel, she said. I want you to feel the way the mind surrenders last. Not like a coward, like a good bookkeeper, counting, reconciling, knowing there will be a zero at the end of the row whether you arrive crying or composed. 11. The word came as a grunt. The water touched his lower lip. It tasted of iron and old leaves and the ghost of diesel. He found himself thinking, stupidly, about the way the comb jellies would look in a month when the water got so cold. It went clear as a bell, and you could see every star reflected under the dock. "Do you want me to go?" she asked. The question was quiet. It was not one he'd expected to be given. He thought. He counted. He wanted her to stay because the line on a page requires 2 numbers to be anything. One would just sit there and be itself. He wanted her to go because he did not want her to have to stand in the rain and make this a part of the film that would loop in her head. "Stay until 12, he said. 12, she said, at the same time he did. The water closed over his mouth as if a careful hand laid across it to hush him. His nose burned. He found himself trying to keep it free because that is what noses request and bargain for. Then he exhaled slightly, and the water went up, and his body bellowed at him. Not words. The opposite of words. He did not fight. The chain did not need his assistance. He counted without sound. 13 for the way the water found his eyes and washed them like windows he had not cleaned in years. 14 for the way his chest hurt. And then hurt turned into bright, sharp, organized pain, and then into something else, something flaring, as if the body were remembering a light from childhood and insisting it was still there. 15 for the way his hands opened and opened without him, and then stopped. 16 for the single clear picture that arrived. The ledger by the kitchen phone of a man who made honest squares with his pencil. A girl in a chair, swinging one leg, learning what time does to water. He did not get to 17. She did not look away. She watched his face because looking away would have made this something she let happen. She waited past the moment when bodies sometimes change their minds. She waited the way she trained herself to wait, for class schedules and therapy appointments and years and men who lied without blinking and men who blinked because they had learned that blinking convinces some people you are telling the truth. She waited until his chest moved once more and then did not. Then she drew her phone and said softly and clearly, "Ledger closed." And the countdown vanished. Detective Shore would receive nothing except silence. When she stepped to the edge and leaned out, the water washed over his cheeks the way a mother might. One last smoothing. She put her palm on his forehead and let it stay there long enough to make a print that the rain erased immediately, because water cares about its own work, not yours. She did not take the chain off. She did not need to. She tracked the tide in her head. The water would slack. The eelgrass would lay down. The sun would take the color out of the clouds by 6:22, and the harbor office would unlock at 8. The first man there would refill the bucket of ice for the bait freezers. He would notice nothing except the way the gulls were silent. It would mean weather in the afternoon. She walked back to the car and sat. Dripping on the seat she did not have to sit in again. She let the heater fog the windows, and then she wiped the inside of the windshield with the sleeve of her coat, because fog everywhere is not a message. Sometimes it is just water. She drove to the end of the pier, relocked the chain behind her, slid the brass key back onto the ring. Harbor Street held its breath in front of her, as if the whole town were asleep and had been forever. The fob sat in her cup holder, like a small black period at the end of a line. The dash cam's red light went dark when the ignition did. 3 blocks up, she pulled into a space in front of a bakery that would open in 3 hours to sell versions of bread to people who had stopped eating bread, except when it was called by another name. She took a small notebook from the glove box. The cover was blue. The elastic band was loose at one end because she used it so often. There were 4 names on the open page. She drew a line through Miles Carter. She had written his current name in pencil and his former name in ink and drawn a double line between them so they would not have to forgive each other. She thought of Detective Shore. The woman had called 3 times in the spring, questions so carefully non-accusatory that they were as sharp as scalpels. Do you know anything about the boat found near Dogfish Key? Do you have any knowledge of the disappearance of Colum Hart? Would you be willing to talk about the man who used to fish with your father? She'd like Shore. Liking was a complication. She had decided to wait to like anyone until later. She set the notebook on the passenger seat. There were 2 names left. One was underlined. Brody Pike was not a name that admitted easily that it belonged to the same man who'd signed Robert Platt on a mortgage application in Tulsa County. Men who liked the ocean's receipts often carried the ocean with them like a smell. It seeped into their other lives, made their papers damp. She drove south along the inlet road. The trees came in close and let her go, came in close and let her go. When she passed the sign where the county line shifted jurisdictions, like a belt that had lost its notch, she let herself think once of her father's hands, knuckles chapped in winter, the crescents of dirt he could not quite remove from under his nails, the patience in the way he taught knots. "You don't fight rope," he had said when she was 8 and impatient and wanted to muscle the line into something it did not want to be. "You ask it to remember the shape you need. It will." She had not yet decided what to do when she found Pike. The math argued for symmetry. The math also allowed for interest. She was a good bookkeeper. Good bookkeepers do not pretend that numbers will lie for them or that mercy is a kind of arithmetic. Mercy is a personal decision. Mercy is not a ledger line. At the north end of town, the new bridge crossed the Narrows where the current ran fast and thick and brown-green like muscle under skin. She drove to the center and stopped where she could not be seen from the shore and turned on her hazard lights as if she had a simple problem. She got out and walked to the railing and looked down at the cold. The tide had turned. The surface showed little standing waves where the bottom bossed the water into telling the truth about depth. She took the photograph from the inside pocket of her coat, the one that was soft with the oil of her hands after years of being taken out. Put away, taken out. It showed a man holding a fish big enough to be proud of. The fish's mouth was open in perpetual surprise. The man's was not. He looked as if he had worked for the fish. He looked like a ledger that added clean. "I am finished with the minute before the minute," she said aloud, because something should be said in air. "I am almost finished with the ledger." She watched the water drag itself around pilings and tell itself a story. She slid the photo back into the pocket. She went back to the car. The hazard lights ticked in the steady rhythm of something that could go on indefinitely and would not. By the time she reached the highway, morning came in completely. The clouds had moved offshore to sit and think about what kind of afternoon they intended. The roadside brush lit up with that brief, precise gold that people spend whole lives waiting to see on purpose. She merged into the slow lane. Truckers sprawled in the fast lane with the confidence of men who could point to logbooks that told the truth at least twice a week. The radio caught a station long enough to sing a chorus about someone who had lost someone and found themselves, and then it fuzzed into static that was not unpleasant. She turned it down. 2 exits ahead, she took the ramp toward the ferry. The timetable sat folded in the cup holder. She did not need it. Tide tables were older, and she had memorized them the way some people memorize birthdays. She knew when the ferry would run, even if the boat said it would not. Boats are like men. They can be compelled. Tides less so. At the booth, a boy in a beanie that made him look like a seal took her money and gave her a receipt he did not need to give. She thanked him because there was no reason to be unkind to a boy who would someday know more than he wanted. On the deck, she stood at the rail and watched the wake knot itself into rope. Across the channel, the other ferry came on steady, white and green, working its own arithmetic. She looked down at the water and thought, not of numbers, but of the way her father had held line lightly, of the way the boat takes a man's weight and makes it less or more depending on the way he steps, of the way on certain mornings you can see so far into the inlet it feels like the water is considering forgiveness. It never does. It balances. That is not cruelty. That is not kindness. It is the oldest ledger, kept in a hand so steady nobody sees the effort. She put her palm flat on the rail and felt the vibration of the engine. She watched gulls fight the wind and then fold and let it carry them. She thought of a man at the bottom of a dock and did not imagine his last look because she had seen it. She let the image pass through without hitching it to anything romantic. She had left flowers nowhere. She would leave none. She reached into her coat and thumbed the phone awake one more time, just to watch the screen say nothing was queued, nothing was pending, the way a balanced page sits quiet. She closed her eyes for a count of 12 because he had asked, because she had said she would stay, because sometimes a number is a better prayer than a word. When she opened her eyes, the other shore was closer. The ferry's horn sounded once, then again, long, low, unambiguous. Ahead, the slip opened its mouth. The deckhands threw their lines. The cleats bit. The boat came home in the way boats do, by obeying. Marina stepped back from the rail and went to her car and started the engine and checked the notebook one more time before she put it away. 2 names left. Numbers to carry. The tide turning. The ledger steady in her hands. This was Midnight Horror Society. Dark curiosity for sleep. Until your next midnight session. Sleep well.